If it's not, oh well. All right, I don't know why they let me on here, but this definitely doesn't have much to do with threat intelligence.
Are you sure this is filming, right?
Oh, can you move the shutter over the thing? There it is.
Nice.
I'm filming my portion, so if you don't want your voice heard and you're in witness protection, why are you here? I don't know, but
You can use that remote if you want as well.
Okay.
It's just the right arrow on the right side of the remote. Yeah.
Wild. Okay. So we've been gifted with a wonderful gift of being able to invest in ourselves in a burgeoning field where we, as cybersecurity engineers, as IT people, are going to be kind of top dogs when it comes to how information is transmitted. And information, we talk about the information revolution that has happened in the last 30 years, the same way that like my grandparents would talk about like James Watt inventing the steam engine. So today we're going to be looking at a bunch of different use cases for how how the rubber of information technology has met the road of society and how it has changed it. So quick preview, we're going to be looking at Russian disinformation, PSYOPs. We're going to be looking at the Great Firewall of China, and we're going to be looking at how basically Facebook started the Arab Spring. So there is a reality that we have to admit when we deal with Russian disinformation, is that they have a goal for the United States, and that is to get President Trump reelected. I don't know why. That's their problem. I'm not qualified to make sure or to theorize on how or why they're doing that, or how they're doing that. This is how, but why they're doing that. And Noam Chomsky said it takes 1 minute to tell a lie and an hour to refute it, and the Russians saw this and called him a filthy casual and made the most complex propaganda machine I have ever heard of. So, oh wait, there's a slide here. There it is. Okay, so I've denoted 3 different kinds of accounts that I think are affiliated with Russian intelligence operations. That is the active agitators, the inactive agitators, and then the shills. We'll get to a particular shill later. But the active agitators, a lot of the hallmarks of them are they don't have, the FBI agent last night kind of talked about how the English that people from other countries translated doesn't really pass the sniff test for us like native English speakers. And so their writing is stilted. It doesn't have any of the cultural touchstones that we share as Americans. They never talk about silly bands. They never talk about Bakugan. All they talk about is like, the only way to describe it is really just like pushing negative energy out into the world and hoping that America goes into a civil war, which I've had conversations with people that are convinced that that's going to happen in the next 10 years. And I've been around the United States quite a bit. I don't think that's correct, but it's still it's scary to know that there are people who are putting this much effort into, hey, I'm not your dad. It's okay. Yeah, you want to talk about? No way. Cool. So all they do, a lot of what they've done is push anti-Ukraine and pro-Russian narratives. We'll get to some of that later, but here's some pretty egregious examples of like this information. I'm going to read this in the voice that I would imagine this guy would sound like if he was real. Wrong! 20 years U.S. Navy retired, worked in communications with top secret space plus. First, you don't know what the metetial is. Second, all the real sensitive stuff are double encrypted. So even if you read it, you wouldn't understand it. Your statement means nothing. And this is in response to, I think, some Russian documents that got leaked. This wasn't like the Alex Tahara thing from the Air Force a couple of months ago. This was a different thing. But like, first off, like, where's Mason? Mason, double encryption means absolutely nothing, right? Yeah, pretty much.
It's just encryption.
And also, it's just regular encryption, right? Also, like, what is going on with this? And I sent this to back when I was a carpenter up in Seattle, I used to work under a Ukrainian cabinetry guy. I sent him this, and he laughed. I've never seen him laugh in my entire life. But so, they also make copious use of AI, right? It took me an embarrassingly long amount of time to realize that this was fake. Like, it actually, I think I was like 6 hate tweets, 6 doom scrolls down before I was like, wait a minute, that harness is nonsensical. He looks like he's coming out of Top Gun. I didn't know they did this for the Ukrainian Air Force, but whatever. And also, there is no legitimate reason to Photoshop a picture like this unless you're pushing the narrative that Volodymyr Zelensky is just embezzling American dollars to enrich himself. They also do some weird ad hominem attacks where they're like, yeah, he's on cocaine, but if I was running a country that was currently getting invaded by this guy, I would probably be on cocaine too. Anyway, there's no way this guy was kicking it with Putin. So here's a list of suspected Russian affiliated accounts. Some of the interesting ones are this is the only one that's not affiliated with an English-speaking country. This person is pretending to be Dutch. This persona is pretending to be Dutch. These two got banned. This one, they all have like weird personas. I think it's like due to the individual preferences of like the person working for the Russian intelligence agency that is behind them. This one just really likes like really blatant racism. It's really ugly. This one really likes anti-vax stuff. This one really likes Civil War narratives. This guy, this guy is an American. He's a real American. In fact, Emma over there went to high school with this guy, right? And he apparently the pipeline was like he went from like Ted Kaczynski eco-terrorist to like big fan of Bernie to now he's pushing for the Russian government. Coincidentally, the year that he started dating Miss Universe 2022 Russia. I'm not saying that there's a correlation. However, also I know that this happened. I don't have time to unpack this. I really wish I did. Anyway, so if you're working. What I said earlier about it takes an hour to refute a lie, these people are the main people that I've been consulting. I think you guys should be aware of this guy. He makes short-form YouTube content that's really digestible for people. He has a cybersecurity background, and he was an infantryman, I think, or a crew chief for like a decade and a half. So he knows all about how the military works. And she's also like, she's an academic, so if you're into that kind of thing. But like, I like this guy a lot. But they all work on Russian disinformation and debunking that. So there's a really interesting article that Dr. Bueno put out about the Lahaina wildfires, where there was like Hawaii, not Ukraine. Like there was a bunch of hashtags that was pushed by the Russian intelligence agency in order to sow disunity within the United States. And so taking a hard turn right to our friends in China. I love Chinese people. I'm friends with a lot of Chinese people. Chinese government's a little bit different, though. If Xi Jinping came to you today and said, "Hey, let's cook up a firewall that is able to censor 1 point whatever billion people they're at," as cybersecurity engineers, let's look at the specs that we're dealing with. So think about that: 1 billion users, and then average throughout an entire day, 18.47 terabits. So that's just average. So I would guess that peak is about 40 terabits per second, and that's a lot of terabits. That's a lot of Cisco switches. And you also have to kind of keep up with the times of what's kosher and what's not by the Chinese government. I'm sure 10 years ago they weren't blocking the word Xi Jinping and Winnie the Pooh in the same sentence, but you also look at like those numbers.
What?
This is not scripted.
That was actually in my script.
Yeah.
I have more to get through, okay, I promise. Okay. These numbers are from 2022, so I would guess the actual peak is like 50 terabits a second. That's a lot. According to Zach Thompson, the peak that BYU's ever seen has been like 36 gigabits, and that's even while we're shunted into some of the stuff that the church owns. Anyway, wait. Okay, yeah, so, wait, there we go. Okay, so there is a thriving, really interesting internet measurements community, academic community, where they have basically reverse engineered the entirety of the mechanism of the Chinese firewall, or the Great Firewall of China, which is a fire name. All DNS servers within China, or I think it's authoritative DNS servers. This part's a little technical, so if you don't worry about it. All of them are controlled by the Chinese government, and that is why Google initially pulled out of China. They had offices in, I think, Hainan, and then they pulled out because they didn't want to hand control over Google DNS to the Chinese government. And there's this really interesting thing that I think is super goofy, but if you send a TCP segment in plain text that has like any of these keywords or any like heuristic, it matches any heuristics that like, oh, this looks like Tor traffic or this looks like VPN traffic, because VPNs outside of China are straight up illegal. It'll it'll be intercepted by this filter, and then a TCP reset segment will be sent to both ends, but the data will still go through. So there's like half of a dozen browsers that just completely ignore TCP resets entirely. Isn't that wild? And the other method is there's hefty fines for people that are individually hosting content that is not deemed compliant by the censorship mechanism. And so there is the self-censorship. There's, I swear, every 6 months they change their mind about Wikipedia. There's either a self-hosted option on the dark net, or they allow it back in, but they have control over it. It's weird. It's really weird. Is this my last slide on this? No. So what's really crazy about it is this is a sample of a bunch of IT students within China. 66% of them scale the firewall every single day just with VPNs. And of that, or I think of that sample, 72% of them want uncensored foreign media. And 80% of them just want to use stuff like Facebook, Google, Twitter, all of that, without having to use Chinese-controlled alternatives like, what is it called? Like the Alibaba group, the Baidu group. They don't have to use Baidu. They don't have to use whatever the other Twitter is. This is a really interesting paper. I would recommend you guys read it. I forgot to put a source list on there. Okay, never mind. Here's a list of the things that are being blocked. This is split up into unigrams, bigrams, and trigrams, which I think is just one and 2 and 3 word groups, I believe. So all of these are like all the names. I don't know who Morty is. Morty. Anyway, all of these are like pro-democracy activists. I think this guy is associated with the Falun Gong, like that cult that runs Shenyang. Anyway, this is where like the meat of it is. This, you know, those memes where you're getting your butt kicked in League of Legends, and then you said 1989 Tiananmen Square, and then everything drops. That's because of these.
Yeah.
This is DNS stuff, but there still is content inspection for the individual TCP segments, which again, I think they only actually use DNS filtering over TCP, but there was a massive update to the firewall that I didn't catch 6 months ago, and they completely overhauled this entire system. But this is how it's been for the last since 1996. So what is that, 23 years? I don't know how many years that is. Something like that. Oh, anyway, so might want to take a picture of that. MIT.edu is not blocked. They want Chinese students to go to MIT, right? But scratch.mit.edu is blocked, and I'm assuming that's because some kid made like a free Taiwan game or something like that. So raise your hand if your first interaction with coding was on Scratch, right? And it was a pretty valuable resource, obviously, because you're here listening to me yap about this kind of thing. But like, think about like they're depriving their people of this resource. Anyway, moving on to the Middle East. Information and Revolution. That's a fire title. So here's a quick introduction to the Arab world. This is the Levant region, the Gulf, the Nile, and then the Maghreb. We're going to be dealing with mostly these guys over here. Tunisia is right here, and I really hope you guys know this. That's Egypt. On December 17th, 2010, a man named Mohammed Bouazizi, Allah Yerhamu, lit himself on fire in front of the Ben Arous government building in protest of the mistreatment that he felt by the Tunisian government. And this, I think on December 18th, was the largest protest in Tunisian history, ever. And so this is the vibe that they brought to the function. The revolution is owned by the Tunisian youths or young Tunisians. And then Sahel Shahid al-Batal Mohammed Bouazizi, which that word Shahid, that means the square of the heroic martyr, Mohammed Bouazizi. That is martyr is a very politically charged word, especially in the North African region, Middle East region. Like people that are dying in Palestine right now, they're saying that they're not killed, they're martyred. So on this, what I forgot to include here was the President Zine El Abidine, I forgot his last name, Abdel something, there. He resigns, the president of Tunisia resigns, and then in solidarity with the Tunisians, and there's a shared struggle between the Egyptians and the Tunisians. They're majority Muslim, they're majority Arab, they both have authoritarian governments. They end up, it's kind of hard to quantify this with pictures, but basically they see the pictures of Mohammed Bouazizi, they see other people who are lighting themselves on fire in front of government buildings in protest, and they are angry. They want a democratic regime, or not democratic regime already, but they want a democratic society. And so you can see it's not just like Muslims, it's not just Arabs. I'm pretty sure he's a Coptic Christian protesting, and there's a lot of young people. And January 27th, the Egyptian government cuts most ISPs' access, except for the one, I think, associated with the Egyptian Stock Exchange, which I think this president, Hosni Mubarak, had like a significant stake in. I don't know. Anyway, February 10th, is that 13 years ago today, I believe? I don't have a watch. But he announces that he will not run again. And then this guy, who looks super happy, Omar Suleiman, announces Mubarak has stepped down. And he really hasn't made much of a public appearance since. And I think he died a couple of years later. So a lot of people, the history community, the intelligence community, have saw this, and it's kind of like India getting the nuclear bomb, where we were like, we knew this was going to happen eventually, but why was Mohammed Bouazizi, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, that lit off the powder keg of the Middle East, North Africa region? Well, in my opinion, it has something to do with this graph. This is Facebook users in Egypt by thousands. 783 now. At about that time, there's almost 10 times the users. And you think about in 2010, I was like 7 years old. But you think about 2010, the people that were using Facebook at the time, they were young, relatively wealthy, relatively politically active, and relatively technologically literate college students, ostensibly. And they are the people that did all of the organizing of the protests. So the ISPs got cut off in January 27th. I don't know how they were able to do this, but people were able to get internet access. I think probably there was instances of point-to-point connections on a boat in the Mediterranean, which is wild. There was instances of people just using satellite communication. There were people that were, like I think WhatsApp was still allowed, because that was a primary communication. What would happen was the Egyptian government would monitor Facebook, and people would be like, protest at this square on the other end of the city across the Nile. And then everyone else would be in these WhatsApp groups who are like, guys, we're lying about that. We're going to be protesting in Tahrir Square, which is where pictures like this come from. This doesn't happen overnight, right? This doesn't happen without a crazy amount of communications technology behind it. So, all right. So what? I've shown you 3 instances of 3 different countries and how information technology has shaped them. I think what I said earlier is true, where as people who have the opportunity to get an education in this burgeoning field, and like every year there's more attention drawn to us, but a lot of people don't know what we do. We have the right and the ability to invest our labor and our expertise into projects that we think will make the world a better place. We saw in Russia that they choose to use their IT expertise and existing American-built IT infrastructure and Twitter to compromise the democratic processes of the country that I live in. We saw in China that the Chinese government is selfishly cutting their citizens off from the outside world in order to control ideas. And we see in Egypt that young people our age got together and were able to replace a dictatorship with a slightly more amenable dictator. But they were still able to effect a great change. And in my opinion, opinions may vary, but in my opinion, that region is a more democratic and more politically conscious place of the world today. Coincidentally, the guy who's now in charge, who got put in charge after a bunch of protests, moved the capital of Egypt out into the middle of the desert where there's only one government-controlled train to it. I wonder if that has anything to do with the fact that he knows he can't regulate the internet because people like us know how to break it. Thank you very much.
Yeah.